If you give him a glass of milk, he'll probably ask you for a straw. When he's finished, he'll ask for a napkin. Then he'll want to look in the mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache. When he looks in the mirror, he might notice his hair needs a trim. So he'll probably ask for a pair of nail scissors. When he's finished giving himself a trim, he'll want a broom to sweep it up. He'll start sweeping, and he might get carried away and sweep every room in the house. Now I'm sure you can see where this is going. But as the story continues, well, the mouse gets thirsty again. And, you guessed it, he asks for a glass of milk. And chances are, if you give him a glass of milk, he'll ask for a cookie to go with it. Now I love this story because if you think about it, it's so much like the story of our lives. One thing leads to another, which leads to another, and suddenly we're back where we started, the cookie. Our stories continue coming back to this one thing. The one thing that we keep getting distracted from. The one thing that's actually the best thing for us. See, stories touch the core of who we are because even our existence was based on a story. The story of our Creator. See, Jesus, he told stories. He lived one, and now he's writing ours. Have you ever heard the quote that says, behind every smile, there's a story of 1,000 tears? I'm going to say it a little bit differently, that behind every smile, there's a broken heart for 1,000 stories. Every heart is unique and different, but there's one thing that makes our stories align, and it's this, that our stories bring us back to the things we want the most. For some, it's happiness. For others, it's wisdom, but for me, it was brokenness. I believe that a good story requires a heart that chooses to live in the present moment, but real stories derive from broken hearts. Now, last semester, I wrote my story in a song called Surgery. And at the surface, my song talks about an actual physical surgery. And if that was the only story, there would be a good story. But this is a real story, and real stories expose broken hearts. I love what gospel artist Tasha Cobbs says about brokenness. She said, God will break you to promote you, to put you in your right way, but when he breaks you, he doesn't destroy you. He doesn't hurt you. He does it with grace. It's as if brokenness is the path to wholeness in our future, that without it, life would be too easy. There'd be nowhere to fall. It'd be kind of like doing senior year without Capstone. It's just too easy. So that's why when I think of being broken, I don't see my life and my identity scattered in pieces. I see those broken pieces, but they're bound in grace. And that's what it means to be gracefully broken. This reminds me of something that was said in an interview last semester with a friend of mine, who's a rapper and songwriter, Tyron Boysen. He said this, I'm broken and I'm human, just like everyone else. And I can go through life just the same, but I want people to know that my music is a way to relay that back to God. Similarly, I want my music to be a way to express my brokenness. I want people to see the areas of my life that I'm broken. So today I want to share a part of that song with you.
I'ma just be real for a minute. Sometimes I wish that you could see it. My life under a microscope. So come on, let's be real for a minute. I take off my shoes so you can walk in it and hear my heart like a stethoscope. 'Cause there's no diagnosis for all my motives. There's no prescription that can fit this description. I've got a bad case of shame and fear, and this disease has poisoned the atmosphere. And they say there's something wrong with me. No, It's just a little bit of surgery. You gotta diagnose it, figure out this problem and reverse it. Medicate and isolate, remove the parts and then replace. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just a little bit of surgery. Sometimes it's hard to forget, to try to numb the pain and pretend. But those scars, they keep reminding you that you're delicate and fragile. And it's not medical, it's correctable. It's not a problem, you're completely flawless. You've got a mindset that needs repairing, and a heart that needs some restoring. And don't believe that it's who you are, no. It's just a little bit of surgery. You gotta diagnose it, figure out this problem and reverse it. Medicate and isolate, remove the parts and then replace. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just a little bit of surgery. You gotta diagnose it, figure out this problem and reverse it. Medicate and isolate, remove the parts and then replace. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just a little bit of surgery. And when you're paralyzed with fear and you're posting heart can barely stand here, don't let it flatline, and don't let your heart die. You might bend, but you won't break. Just endure the heartache. So don't let it flatline, and don't let your heart die. You might bend, but you won't break. Just endure the heartache. It's just a little bit of surgery, yeah.
Brokenness was that thing, that one thing that I kept missing. And it took me being physically broken to realize that I missed it. The one thing that God kept bringing me back to again and again, the cookie. My song says you have to diagnose it, figure out the problem, and reverse it. The brokenness that I had lived in for so long was finally being diagnosed. See, this year was my second knee surgery in 5 years. For all of high school, my knee was weak, and I acknowledged that. It was what Paul would call a thorn in my flesh. But I saw it quite literally as just that, just weak flesh. And I didn't realize the mental toll that it took on me until I wrote this song, that my weak, broken knee had instilled tremendous fear in me. And God kept bringing me back. Every time I ran, every time I jumped, every time I played sports, and I kept missing it. I had put so much dependence on something that was weak, as if I was expecting it to be stronger without relying on the greater source. And God showed me that this wasn't the only area of my life I'd made that mistake. Just as I had put so much faith in my knee, I also had put so much identity in my circumstances. See, in 8th grade, I had my plans for high school mapped out. And I'll tell you, they didn't exactly involve me being here. I attended Arapahoe High School for my first 2 years, and it already not being my first choice for high school, I didn't love it. At least freshman year. Sophomore year was a different story. I began really liking Arapahoe, and maybe a little too much. I got really comfortable with my circumstances and where I was at, and I was drawn into a crowd that drew me away from my values. That summer, just as I had started to find my identity in those things and in those people, it was taken away from me. My parents, they decided to send me part-time to Front Range, and I was so tied to my circumstances that when they were gone, I broke. Junior and senior year were similar in the sense that I had put so much identity into things like sports and my athleticism, and when they were gone, I broke. And quite literally too, my relationships, my identity, my future, my body broke. I've had doubts, I fed on lies, I experienced shame, and then I let them become a part of who I was. I believe that my physical brokenness was only a reminder of the true brokenness that I was struggling with inside. My song addresses that brokenness because it's a real story. But as I began to break, God was mending my story. He began to take those broken pieces and bind them in grace. He showed me that for so long I'd asked for him to change my circumstances and not my heart. My heart revolved around my circumstances, and when they came crashing down, my heart came right on top of it. That I prayed that he would strengthen my knees so I could rely on my own strength again, instead of asking for his strength to get me through. I prayed that he would make my relationships better, instead of asking for the heart to love others in the midst of hard times. I prayed for my plans to work out, instead of praying for his will to be done in my life. But as my physical self was being repaired, so was my heart. I was in a stage of fixing. Now this is the surgery part. My song says medicate and isolate, remove the parts and then replace. God began to take the weak parts of me and replace them with his strength, showing me that I wasn't created to be strong, nor was I created for this earth, so it was going to disappoint me. Then there's the healing stage, and healing is about regaining the strength of Christ and not our own. During spring break, I got my surgery and I spent lots of time regaining my strength, learning how to bend and straighten my knee again. And I learned how hard it was to heal once we've been utterly broken. See, the doctor said that my ACL was completely severed, that there was nothing left, and I had been truly broken. And when you've been truly broke, the path to healing is a much harder road. Things that once were so easy, like walking, now became so difficult. And it's the same with spiritual healing once we've been broken. We can't go on as if circumstances were the same. Otherwise, we relive the whole story, we get distracted, and we stray away from the point of our story. And God again will bring us back to the cookie. Because our stories always bring us back to the things in life that we need the most. And as God brought me back to this place of brokenness, he showed me what it was that I needed the most. And that was music. That no matter how broken my body was, I could always sing and make music. Ever since I was 8 years old, music wasn't just something that was a hobby. It was something that I seemed to need. This year, when I went into the studio to record this song, it was the first time that I'd gotten to record my own song. And this time, I had last semester had the privilege of working with a Christian rapper, Darren Hayes, and get to be a part of his album and work in the studio with him. But this time was different because I had to write my own music, my own lyrics, my own harmonies. But I remember sitting in front of the microphone thinking about how I would give anything to do this for the rest of my life and share my story in this way. God had given me music because I needed it most in my life. It was a platform for my testimony. And there was no better way for me to process my pain and my brokenness than through music. Because every time my heart felt something, I wrote about it. And this song specifically was real, and that's why it sparked something special in me. God was bringing me back to something that I needed to know, and that was brokenness. Because that's how our hearts work. They demand a response based on the circumstance we're in. Think about it. When we hear stories of division in our country, we react in rage. Or stories of new technological advancements, we provoke wonder in our hearts. Or we hear stories of babies dying before they've had the chance to breathe their first breath, and we feel sadness. That's because stories originate out of a posture of heart, and mine came from brokenness. So I'm broken and I'm healing, but now I get to experience a heart that is present, a heart that exists in the moment. Scripture says in Psalms 57:7, "My heart, O God, is steadfast. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music." And when a heart can only be steadfast if it's been tested and proved faithful. And when a heart is steadfast, it's the best form of testimony. That's when you can sing and make music. So that's exactly what I did with my capstone. I positioned my heart in such a way that it could soak up the story that God had breathed in me and posture it as a testimony. Because stories are just testimonies. Before Jesus left this earth, he commanded us to share them. And sometimes we tend to take sharing our testimonies as this great big thing that has to be dramatic and planned out. But stories are just telling where we've been, and where we are, and where we hope to go. So this song is my testimony. It's where I've been, and it's that moment when God revealed that one thing. At the beginning of this year, our senior class took a trip, 4 hours in hot, sweaty vans, just to get to the middle of nowhere. Because chances are, if you're in the middle of nowhere, you'll hear the voice of God. We went up there to find that one thing that our stories kept circling back to. And I sat in the middle of the woods for 8 hours, waiting for God to spark a truth in my heart and reveal himself to me. I think we all expected that it would be this clear, audible voice, and God would tell us exactly what we were supposed to do for this project that literally defined our senior year. But that wasn't exactly the case for me. A few hours in, still nothing. Just super uncomfortable silence and a spider in my sleeping bag. I asked God just for a verse or just a chorus. Instead, he gave me 2 words: be present. So I sat there for another 4 hours. Finally, I thought, God, I've been here for 8 hours. How much more present can I be? And it wasn't until after the retreat that I really realized what he meant. And I went so far beyond just music and Capstone. It was the fact that I had spent most of high school wishing for it to be over and excited to move on to the next stage of my life. But being present meant living for the now and not the next year. Being present meant maybe getting to know somebody that I might not normally take the time to get to know. Being present meant slowing down and feeling things that I had become numb to, one of which was my brokenness. See, I was so numb to the feeling because being broken was a feeling that I was used to. But God quickly showed me that my definition of brokenness was different than his, because to me, I was broken, I didn't work properly, and I was incapable. But to God, he saw my brokenness and my mess, yes. But then he saw his blood and body broken for me so I was capable of being fixed and worthy of his grace. 2 months later, God gave me this song, and I had no idea how much it would shake my capstone. It put me in a really vulnerable place, because it was the first time a song had made it out of my journal and onto Spotify. And that's because it was a real story and not just a good one. Now my capstone is titled Music for the Kingdom. And I know some of you are confused because my music isn't necessarily classified as a Christian song or doesn't say Jesus in it. And that was actually intentional, because Christian songs, well, they reach Christians and the occasional atheist that turns on Caleb radio station. But music for the kingdom reaches everyone, Christians and non-Christians alike. God commanded us to go out and disciple all nations, not just those who already know him. So my song is a testimony. And you can't put a genre on that. Now, Lecrae, one of my favorite rappers, he once said this: I'm not a Christian rapper. I'm a rapper who raps about what I believe in, just like Kanye, just like Drake. Similarly, I love that quote because that's what I aim to do with my music. I want to sing about what I believe in. And if it happens to be Jesus, well, call me a Christian, not my music. I find that there's this tension between fame and faith, as if you can only have one or the other. But I read a book this year that addresses that topic. It's called Grace Unplugged. It's about the journey to fame of a young artist, Gracie Trey. And as she leaves her faith behind to write music in a secular world, she learns hard lessons. But by the end of the story, she comes back and she's broken. She writes this. She writes these lyrics: I've got nothing left to give. I gave up everything. So there's nothing left to lose for me now. Could you forgive me somehow? Now, this is the response of a broken heart. It's weak, it's healing, and it's present. Because yes, good stories come from hearts that are present, but real stories derive from broken hearts. So question, what's your cookie? What's that one thing that God is using to tell your story?